So I was talking before about presence and Buddha nature, and this also brings up the question of awakening. So this is a topic that I find a little tricky to talk about because everyone has a different definition of it. You know, out of all these books, sure, there would be some agreement, but everyone's going to find their own way to define it and their own way to talk about what awakening is. And so what I find is that often people don't talk about awakening, even though we've got this guy up here, the Buddha. The Buddha translated means the awakened one. This practice is clearly about some kind of awakening, but it is a tricky terrain, tricky area to talk about. So I'm going to just try and offer some current thoughts on this. So for a lot of people, meditation practice will be about relaxing, calming down, de-stressing, maybe to help with mental health, and that's how I first got into it. And all those things are great. And if that's your practice is heading towards that, or it's giving you those things, and that's what you want, amazing, do that. And I sometimes say, I think it'd be great if everybody in the world meditated, 10, 15 minutes a day, and got some of those benefits from practice. I started practicing to try and get some of those benefits, and what I found was those did come along, but when I started experiencing the more profound sides of meditation practice is when things really opened up, and that's also when even more of those sort of mundane benefits came. So the profound side of meditation is awakening, is insight. And what the insight is, it's talked about in various different ways, but I'm going to just frame it today as recognition of Buddha nature. So what I mean here is a lot of the time, for most people, you're kind of going around like you're in a dream or a daydream, right? And this is the waking up part. We're in this kind of daydream where we are not fully aware or cognizant of what is happening. There's a sort of reactivity or a conditioned habitual sort of response to what's going on in life. And part of that habitual reactivity is the sense of what the world is, what our selves are. And I don't know why this is the case, but it seems like for everybody, that sense is that we are this fixed individual in a world of things that we need to somehow control and manipulate in order to be happy. And this is coming back to those 8 worldly winds, right? Trying to find refuge in all these things that we can control. And this, it does make some kind of evolutionary sense or biological sense that if we feel like we're a separate individual, we can do things to maintain our longevity. Our actions can be motivated by trying to keep this separate individual alive and to, to reproduce, to continue on in some way. And so there's an evolutionary component to it, but the practice can open up a sense of who we are that is much bigger than the individual self. So I've been giving talks here in the day of practice and in my drop-in class weekly, and other the Tuesday night Dharma talks here. And I'll talk a bit about emptiness, talk a bit about not self, and this sort of insight practice. What we're trying to learn through practice in that sense is to gain different ways of looking, different perspectives, insights that allow us to shift our perception of what is happening, allow us to open up some freedom, some meaningfulness through a perspective shift. And when we do this, it's not that we're completely trying to get rid of the old way of doing things. It's more like we're gaining, adding on, being able to be flexible and responsive and shift how we view things. So the typical way of feeling and understanding, this is a deeply embodied sense, it's subconscious, it's not our intentional conscious doing, but that sense is that we are a separate individual and we need to control, preserve ourselves in some way against all these other individuals or with other individuals, but in a world of individual separate things. And eventually, if we practice and we kind of see through that in different ways, gain these different ways of looking, we get this understanding that we are not separate. The sense of self is being constructed and it's helpful, but it's not the end of the story. Who you think you are, it just isn't the ultimate truth. And what we can open to then is a sense of interconnectedness. If you've heard of teachings around non-duality, a sense that the different things cannot actually be said to be separate. And then our perspective shifts. Instead of being this individual here in this body, we can actually get a sense that what we are is the totality, the wholeness of all things, or the sense of being this, the wholeness, the sum of everything. And so there are different experiences of this. Sometimes in meditation, or particularly on retreat, in intensive practice, you can get a sense of oneness or unity. But I was referring before to this sense of presence. We can actually gain this sense that where we are operating from is this sense of presence, an awareness, a knowing that doesn't feel like it comes from us, or rather it's sort of like, which order do things happen in? Like, do we exist first and then we're aware? Or is awareness already there and then the sense of self comes from that? So it's like shifting into that prior sense of being that unbounded wholeness. And I tie this in with the idea of Buddha nature. So in the Zen tradition, so Buddha nature comes from later Buddhism. It's not so much in the early Buddhist teachings, in the Theravada, more in the Mahayana and Vajrayana. But it's this idea that your true nature is no nature. And while that might sound like, we're heading towards like nihilism or negating what's happening, this idea of your true nature being no nature is actually incredibly freeing. It's the groundless ground. So when you can see through all the layers, you get to the ground, which is actually just that knowing, that presence, that awareness. And the interesting thing is it's not neutral or blank or boring or nihilistic at all. It's actually loving and caring, and it's the source of all things. So as I've been practicing over the years, it's not like, maybe I'll get there one day, but it's not like I'm operating from that place all the time. But more and more, I have this sense of recognizing the wholeness and coming from a place of wholeness rather than coming from the separate individual self. And more there's this recognition that that is available all the time, actually, not just on the cushion, but throughout the day. And interestingly, this is both really profound and really mundane. On the mundane side, all the same things are still happening. There are still books, there's still the sun, there's still walking, there's still eating, sleeping. All of that is the same in a lot of ways. But at the same time, there's a profound shift. It really, to me, feels like it changes the sense of what life is and maybe also what death is, to feel like actually what I am or what is most important doesn't die with this body. So in terms of what we're doing here today, I say all of this as a kind of like, hopefully an opening of what awakening can mean. In terms of practice, what this is like, there is a progression, there is a path. And that's what Buddhist practice, I think, really excels at. This is why we have so many books here. And many of the books have really good instructions, really clear guidelines on you can do this. Try these steps. It's not just about a blind leap of faith, but actually it's a progression. You can build up to it. And so we have the Eightfold Path, is a classic Buddhist teaching. But the eight's a pretty high number to remember, so we can we can reduce it down to 3. The 3 components of the Eightfold Path would be view, conduct, and meditation. And if we practice view, conduct, and meditation, we can progress on the path. And so this offering here is maybe a sense of the view. Like, what is possible from practice? What is it that we're trying to do? And what I'm suggesting is there's the possibility of a radical shift of perspective so that you don't feel like where you're coming from is the separate self, the self that feels lacking and feels really kind of isolated and needs to control things. And instead, where you're coming from can be the wholeness, the vastness, the sense of completeness. And the way to do it is through practice, meditation, through our conduct in the world, and bit by bit, noticing how when we get out of our own way, so to speak, or when we can see through our habitual tendencies, see through how the self gets created, see through just everything that's getting in the way, we actually open up into moments of presence. And they might just be like little glimpses, but eventually those moments and drawing on that resourcefulness turns into like a recognition that can actually be stable and can completely shift the sense of the world and the sense of being. The analogy here that I really like, and it's so simple, is to just imagine a wide open sky. In a wide open sky, it has no bounds, right? We see the sky and it kind of looks like it's, in that space, but the sky is actually limitless. And we imagine that sky as that's what we're trying to see, and that's what we're trying to recognize that is where we're coming from. There's just clouds that get in the way, and the clouds obscure the sense of the sky, but the clouds themselves don't damage the sky. They can't hurt it. So the sky is always there, and we can just practice to try and remove some of those obscurations.